Welcome back, YouTube family. Today's video is a special one. It is one that is going to be commemorating the 20th anniversary of an album that I feel is probably one of the more important albums in the catalog of Nas, widely considered, if not the greatest, one of the greatest hip hop artists of all time. And I think as time has passed, especially with these King Disease records that we've had coming out, I think some of his earlier records are kind of forgotten about, or maybe in this case, his middle records. So, with the 20th anniversary of Godson, I wanted to delve into what went into that album and how I feel like that album defined pretty much his output for the 10 years after that period, leading up until Life is Good in 2012. So, with Godson, what was happening at that time? How was that album shaped? So, number one, he's coming into it off of 2001, the big album Stillmatic. A lot of people consider that his comeback album. If you look at it as a comeback album, that's probably one of the greatest hip hop album comebacks of all time, probably up there with Mama Said Knock You Out. Everything he did on that album was a triumph. We know what happened with Ether, gave him the nod over Jay-Z. But really, I think it wasn't just Ether. I think the whole Stillmatic album kind of refuted everything that we heard on Takeover, everything about the one hot album every 10 years. All of that was refuted by how well-rounded and excellent Stillmatic was from top to bottom. So when you have a project like that, and it sounded very, very lush and very full, you had tracks like Rule, You're the Man, One Mic, even the intro, probably one of the greatest hip hop intros of all time. Everything was grand sounding with that album, from the production to the lyrics to the focus. So when you have an album like that, how do you follow it up? So unfortunately, in Nas's case, during the making of that album, his mother, Ann Jones, got diagnosed with breast cancer, and she unfortunately passed away from that in April 2002. So when that happens, it's probably one of the most hurtful things you can go through emotionally is losing a parent. So when that happened, we saw Nas uncharacteristically just lashing out at everyone. A few months after that, he had a big concert at Hot 97's Summer Jam. That concert, that headlining performance didn't happen because reportedly he wanted to have a mock lynching of Jay-Z, which Hot 97 blocked. After that point, he went on Power 105, a rival station, and basically went on a rant against the entire industry. He did something that you normally don't hear rappers do. He name checked other rappers for having what he considers subpar projects. Cameron is one person that he named. Also named his friend Noriega as he felt it was putting out subpar material. And went at Def Jam directly, who was, of course, affiliated with Jay-Z at the time. So all of that kind of excuse me, at that point, people were really considering or wanting to know what Nas's output was going to be going forward. So a lot of people expected his next album, Godson, to be filled with diss records, to be very aggressive, but that actually didn't happen. We got a prelude in September of 2002 of really where his direction was going to be. And really, we got that focused by looking into the past because that was the Lost Tapes project. And Lost Tapes was actually a collection of older material. And when you listen to that project, when you hear songs like Do Rags, Black Zombies, that kind of gave us a hint of where Godson was going to be. And it also gave you an idea of how in demand Nas was at that time. Because here we are, you have Lost Tapes coming out in September, and less than 3 months later, you get a full length Nas project with Godson. And he actually had to release that a week early because of fears about bootlegging. So when we got this album, completely different from what we got on Stillmatic. Number one, the first thing you're going to notice is the production. A lot more somber, a lot more plodding, for lack of a better word. When you hear songs like The Cross, it almost sounds like a funeral dirge, the way the beat goes. A lot of heavy-handed piano riffs, songs like that. And even still, the lyrical focus is still sharp. He's still attacking the production, but it's a lot more laid back and it's a lot more self-reflective on the majority of the tracks. Even the opening, when you get a track like Get Down, probably one of Nas's most celebrated records at this point. But it's a stripped down James Brown sample, very traditionalist, very kind of against the grain of where the sound of mainstream hip hop was going at the time. While everybody was looking towards, that kind of that more popish sound, he was looking more to traditional, introspective, stripped down hip hop. Just looking at the samples, James Brown on that one, of course, Made You Look, the famous Apache sample, and even a song like Warrior Song, which has that heavy African drum, actually samples of Fela, kind of shows you where his focus was on that point. And one thing you also notice about this album, we already knew Nas was a brilliant storyteller. Just from Illmatic, New York State of Mind was our introduction to that. I think he was solidified as one of the genre's best storytellers when you got Undying Love as the closer on I Am. But this album to me really kind of solidified his versatility as a storyteller because number one you had fictional first person narratives that he's just knocking out the box on this album. You had Get Down, like I mentioned earlier. You had Mastermind, which is kind of told from a mob boss perspective. Then you have Book of Rhymes, which is actually going through his creative process using a first person narrative. And then you have his nonfiction storytelling, which Last Real Nigga Alive, another brilliant song, kind of recapping everything that led up to the Jay-Z feud, but also kind of touching on the tension that he had with people like Biggie, Biggie's tension with Wu-Tang, touching on all that in the story format. And then he also used that track to kind of put a bow on the Jay-Z beef, because at this point, Jay-Z is still going at him. If you listen to Blueprint 2, the title track, Jay is still trying to keep things going and still trying to, I guess, turn the tide of public perception back into his favor. Nas is pretty much saying on this track that he's done with it, and the ending line kind of sums it up perfectly. I was Scarface, Jay was Manolo. It hurt me when I had to kill him and his whole squad for Dolo. He pretty much ends it with that. While Jay-Z's still going, making songs, he pretty much ends it in a few bars stating that I'm done with that. I have bigger fish to fry. And this album is going to be focused on where does my life go now that my mother is gone. And touching on that, even to this day, 20 years later, Nas really doesn't talk much about, those last months with his mother. That's something that I feel he cherishes, that those closing months that he had with her, because we do know that he did get off the road. He stopped making music to take care of her. He also mentioned that she died in his arms. Her last words to him was never give up. He shares a little bit of that, but when you have something like that going on, a hip hop beef is the last thing on your mind. But of course, once he loses her, there's that turmoil that you're going through. There's anger that you feel. There's that hopelessness of not being able to help your loved one as they're slowly debilitating. So he had a lot of anger, and we heard a lot of anger on that in that Power 105 interview, the Jay-Z lynching that he wanted to do. But we see at the end of 2002 with this album, he's kind of come to an area of acceptance at this point. And we hear that on tracks like Dance. He's still wanting or yearning for having those last moments with his mother. But then on the ending track, Heaven, we hear somebody that's accepting of where he is in life and realizing that, because some people never get over losing a loved one. And it's an unfortunate thing to see because it's almost like they died with that loved one. They're not living anymore. And one thing that Nas says is on that ending track is that heaven is something you have to define for yourself, being able to see the beauty in this world while you're still here. Yes, everything is messed up. Yeah, he actually just says it, you're messed up, I'm messed up, the whole world is messed up, but there's still beauty in this that we need to find. And I think that's that piece that he finally got, realizing that, my mother is free from pain now and there's still a lot of life left I have to live. Not even, I believe he wasn't even 30 at the time that he lost his mother. So that is the hopeful note that he ended this album on. But going back to the storytelling, I mentioned the first person narratives, Get Down, Mastermind, Book of Rhymes. I mentioned the nonfiction storytelling that he did with Last Real Nigga Alive. He even did a second person storytelling narrative with I Can, which of course is very difficult to do, but he even pulled that off there. And then you have other tracks like Doug's Mansion, where he's talking about just that spiritual, wanting to see his mother again. And, we know everything he went through with Tupac, their brief rivalry, their tension-filled meetup at Bryant Park and being able to make peace. And then a week later, Pac passing away. He kind of touches on that whole idea of, I'm here and I'm dealing with the pain of losing my mother. And he juxtaposes that with what Afeni Shakur is going through and the fact that her son is the one that she had to bury. So he's reflecting on the pain that she's going through as a mother. And he's juxtaposing that with the pain he's feeling as a son losing his mother. So he's touching on a lot of these themes. He has a few commercial songs on here, but they're more so B-sides, Hey Nas, songs like that. And it's kind of isolated. There's not many songs like that at all on this project. So it was very it's the first time I think he took a big risk. I know it was written was kind of a risk, but it was more so a bigger chance of that paying off because it was a commercial. You're actually moving towards a commercial sound. So, but this to me is a bigger risk where he's stripping all that down because on I Am and Nostradamus, you had those blatantly commercial songs on there that he was shooting for as singles, but you really don't have that on here. The singles that he chose were Get Down, Made You Look was a hit, but it was far from a commercial song. So when you look at the output that he had after this album with Streets Disciple, Hip Hop is Dead, Untitled, this is the beginning of, I feel like, his experimental period, which lasted an entire decade. And I feel like the fact that this album did good commercially as far as sales go, went over platinum, I think it went double platinum. That kind of pushed him to get more confidence to really stick with making experimental albums, putting out experimental singles like Bridging the Gap on his next album, Streets Disciple. It really all started here. And I know some people don't like that experimental period. They were kind of happy when he moved back to more accessible music with Life is Good and then with the King Disease period. But I feel this was instrumental in making him the legend that we now see, being able to take risks and being able to try as many different things as possible with his music to really push it to the limit. And I feel like that all started with losing his mother. I think that kind of showed him that life is really short. Everything that you're trying to do with your career and your music, you need to do it now. So I think, in the 2 decades that have passed, at the time I've heard a lot of people saying they felt Godson was like a top five Nas album. I've kind of felt like it's gone a little bit further now, especially now with these King Disease projects. A lot of people kind of look at Godson as a kind of a middle of the road Nas album. But let me know what you think. I think it's a very important album. I think you can still put it in his top five albums when you look at it from a lyrical focus, because some of his strongest, songs are on here. You look at Book of Rhymes, Last Real Nigga Alive, Get Down. And these are classic Nas tracks right there. So let me know what you guys think. Have you ran back Godson lately? If not, take a listen to it. Let me know how you think it holds up with his rest of his catalog, and let me know what you guys think. Looking forward to hearing from you. Like and subscribe, and let me know any other albums you feel like you want me to do some anniversary pieces on.